Yes, it's time once again for me to pull all you lovely folks in this state-of-the-art video format, the least conducive format for actual data collection. Yes, we're back at it again with yet another Twisted Would You Rather gauntlet, but this time, all 20 questions are themed around EN server events. And while it would be fun for these to make sense, like carving a Halloween pumpkin with maybe Apple or Jack, why not add in a little chaos? This is a gotcha game after all, and every gotcha game is beholden to the whims of RNG, you know? So our bestie, The Wheel, is back at it again to decide which characters we'll be picking between for each of our questions, including now some event NPCs. I've got my own rationales for my picks, but I'll be leaving that for the end, so y'all can play this little game with your friends, fellows, or self, uninterrupted and uninfluenced. Are y'all ready? Then let's get started with our very first question. Would you rather spook Magicam monsters with the Fairy Queen or Cater? Would you rather go trick-or-treating with Kaleem or Jack? Would you rather dance the never-ending Halloween away with Idia or Ernesto? Would you rather collect wishing stars with Stitch or Deuce? Would you rather spend a day at Playful Land with Vil or Sebek? Would you rather rock the Fairy Gala runway with Trey or Azul? Would you rather accessorize your gala outfit with Ace or Eric Venue? Would you rather join the Harvestin Sledathon with Silver or Apple as your team leader? Would you rather train for the bead brawl with Neji or Jade? Would you rather explore Raintree Market with Deuce or Ruggy? Would you rather collect tropical fruit with Gino or Vil? Would you rather go surfing with Ace or Azul? Would you rather dance under the firelit sky with Lilia or Cater? Would you rather work Sam's New Year's sale with Rook or Sebek? Would you rather team up with Apple or Jade for Beans Day? Would you rather go shopping in Crystal Galleria with Jack or Ortho? Would you rather take care of the Sooms with Ruggy or Silver? Would you rather explore the Floor City waterways with Jamil or Kaleem? Would you rather climb the Noble Bell College Bell Tower with Floyd or Idia? Would you rather guard the campfire with Marja or Jamil during Vargas camp? have all your answers compiled? Good. Let's compare notes. Oh, and I'll be passively mentioning some EN server story content here and there, so just to be aware of that. Anyways, for question number 1, would you rather spook Magic Hand monsters with the Fairy Queen or cater? I have absolutely no idea what the Fairy Queen is doing at NRC for Halloween, but I think we'd immediately fail at spooking people if we teamed up. She's just too striking, too demure, and too nice, I think, to scare these rude kiddos. I honestly feel like her guards would be the ones doing the spooking and the magically assisted exits, which would be effective, but not as fun. So instead, I'm going with Cater here and getting buried alive by Heartstable. I really like how creative the solution was to the monster problem, and how well Cater and Co. used their costumes and locale to their advantage in such a simple but effective way. I think I could also lend some credibility to their ghost story, as a lady being buried is even worse than a student, right? A lady couldn't possibly be a student, so they must also be a guest, which means that this has to be real and not a stunt, right? So this really is a skeleton, right? So the Magic Hand monsters are really going to get buried, right? Their shrieks will be music to my ears, and I'm sure Cater will get some good pics to commemorate our collab. Next for number 2, going trick-or-treating with Kaleem or Jack. This one was a little tough because I think Kaleem would genuinely enjoy the trick-or-treat experience, while Jack might be too much of a tough guy to beg for candy. But given how stressful managing Kaleem can be and how into Halloween Jack was during the first event, this could go either way with either individual. But I think at the end of the day, I'd rather go with Jack because I can see this scenario unfolding in a couple different ways, and I think they're both pretty fun. The first is us watching over his siblings as they run around the neighborhood collecting various sweets, which I think would be a cute way to interact with and meet Jack's family. The second is him accompanying me as the result of losing a bet, where he now has to carry all of my candy bags for me, and I'm loading up those bad boys with as much as I can. I could also see Jack carrying his siblings' bags when they got too heavy as well, which would also be cute. But I think regardless of the specifics, having Jack around would just be fun. I wouldn't have to worry about his safety, and he'd be reliable enough to make sure we don't get super sidetracked, meaning we'll be able to hit all of the houses and get as many goods as possible. Question number 3 was dance the never-ending Halloween away with Edea or Ernesto. Sorry, Edea, but this one cannot be anyone other than Ernesto for me. I have no idea if Ernesto can dance, but I do think he'd be much more open to dancing in this scenario than Edea. In fact, I think he'd be much more generically comfortable compared to Edea in a crowd of people. The poor recluse was panicking about the glorious masquerade social, and I think that Edea would hug the wall during the Halloween shindig as well. So I think it would be very, very hard to get him to dance with you. Ernesto, on the other hand, is charismatic and sociable, at least when he wants to be, so I think he'd fit right in at this party, which he couldn't canonically be at, but if he was, I think he'd have fun. Actually, no, Gino would probably be the one having fun. I think Ernesto might rather die than be surrounded by a bunch of hoity-toity teenagers stuffing their faces with hors d'oeuvres while dancing under a disco ball. That seems like a nightmare for Ernesto, actually, now that I'm thinking about it. But since he's here, I think he'll make the best of it. And if that also happens to involve a dance with me, I'm not gonna complain. Next up we had, would you rather collect wishing stars with Stitch or Deuce? I honestly want to collect wishing stars with Stitch because this would be the most chaotic way possible to try to attempt this task. And it'll either go really well or disastrously bad. But either way, it's going to be an experience. Deuce is diligent and honestly probably a more effective partner, but how could anyone say no to Stitch's face? He's so cute and fluffy, and if they do say no even still, I'll just let Stitch go a little feral, or set up a little prank, or otherwise torture these kids until they fulfill their obligations of giving me their wishes. Our reputation will spread like wildfire across campus. Students will fear our names. They will bow before us begging for mercy, which will only be tempted to grant them once we have their wishing star. There is no one that can escape, no one that is safe. They will all comply or there will be hell to pay. Or at least that would be my hope. Because Stitch likely wouldn't care either way and may honestly cause me more trouble than causing our Marks trouble. But again, it would just be an interesting experience, so might as well chance it, right? Next was spend the day at Playfulland with Vil or Sebek. Even though I dunk on Sebek a lot, I'd much rather go to a theme park with him than Vil. While I admire Vil and I think he'd be a very responsible park goer, I just feel like my experience might be a bit limited with him. I can already feel the judgment over the greasy park food and the numerous makeup refresh breaks throughout the day that I would have to endure, which are fine in and of themselves, but I don't think that I would handle it too well given how I tend to enjoy these types of parks. Sure, the makeup refreshes could be while we're in line for a ride, and I also typically don't really buy theme park food because of the prices being absolutely nuts. Did you know that the last time I went to a theme park, those little ice cream dot cups, which are basically just glorified sprinkles, if you ask me, were $12? 12. That is highway robbery. Who is paying that? Why? It didn't cost me that much when I went to Epcot and got ice cream in the France pavilion made from real milk. And that was also recent. I don't know. I don't get it. I don't get it. But since the Playfulland tickets cover the cost of everything, at least the ones that Ernesto gave us did, I am absolutely taking advantage of that and rivaling Grimm's gluttony, which would not be looked upon favorably by Vil. Given knowledge of these tickets being all-inclusive, I would also likely be bringing Tupperwares, which would also be looked down upon by Vil. Although Sebek would also probably judge me, but he's already doing that all day every day anyway, so it wouldn't be anything unexpected, and I wouldn't feel as bad letting him down with my unending appetite as I would with Vil. Plus, Sebek is so naturally loud that he might actually help with the theme park noises. My brain might be able to focus on his shouting instead of the resounding cacophony of noise, so that would be kind of nice too. And I think Sebek would also be able to keep up with me a little bit better. I tend to go on rides again and again and again if I can help it. If the line isn't long, I will just continue to go on that same roller coaster 7 times in a row. I don't care. I don't think Vil would do that, but I think Sebek could probably handle it fine. So we would be able to get more in on our day in that way as well. So Sebek it is. Now, next up was rocking the Fairy Gala runway with Trey or Azul. I honestly would much rather rock it with Azul because I have a feeling that Azul would try to get all of the attention onto himself. Trey would like to disappear in this scenario, I think, and I am not confident enough to stand on my own, so we would likely fail the mission if we were both paired together. But Azul, on the other hand, loves making connections and making impressions, and I have no doubt he'd figure out some way to make this event worth his while if he was forced into the runway position. I've seen this tendency of his talked about before with regards to the Tapis Rouge Groovy arts, specifically the difference between Azul and Jamil's posing, as Jamil is much more protective in his stance, whereas Azul almost seems to be trying to step into the spotlight instead. And I feel like this read is pretty accurate based on their respective poses in that artwork and how they're displayed, so I think I would feel much more comfortable if the focus was more on Azul, and I again just think that he would want the focus to be on him if he had to do this. That, and I would also like to see him get the Gala Couture rather than Trey. I just think Azul's outfit would be more fun and flowy and fancy, which could also aid him in being more of a distraction, and he would just be nice to look at. That's my take anyway. Even if Azul claims that he will fall over his legs 10 times over, I don't believe him. I think he would practice and make sure that he didn't, as he does in every other aspect of his life. So, that's my vote. The next question was accessorizing your gala outfit with either Ace or Eric Venue. And for me, this is Eric. Eric Venue. Eric. 100%. It's not because of my Delulu side taking over. Not at all. If Tapis Rouge is anything to go off of, Ace has no eye or drive for quality fashion. He just follows trends and others' opinions, and there is no way I am taking his advice for this sort of important event. No way. Eric, on the other hand, is a refined gentleman who at the very least understands fashion, or at the very most, is a divine hand at putting outfits together. I'm not sure how much of his aesthetic sense is him versus those around him, because I don't quite remember if fashion was explicitly talked about during our little family dinner during Tapis Rouge. I know cosmetics were, and that was something Eric was well versed in, but I feel like he probably has a stylist that pulls together his outfits for him, that's just kind of like a celebrity thing, I think. And I feel like Eric would be too busy to pick out his own stuff at this point in time. So while he can appreciate fashion, as we see with his reaction to Ville's outfit, I'm not sure he's as savvy as his son when it comes to putting them together. But he has been in these sorts of high fashion circles for long enough to, I guess, help out with accessorizing. And I would much rather take advice from Eric Venue than pretty much any of the boys on campus. I mean, Ville obviously is an exception, and there are a few others, but like, if I had the choice between Ace, who can't decide what the hell he's doing with his life, or Eric Venue, the choice is always going to be Eric. I don't even care if it's a hot dog eating competition. It's just gonna be Eric. So that's who I'm going with here. The next question was joining the Harvest and Sledathon with Silver or Apple as team leader. So for this, I'm gonna have to go with Apple for the sole reason that I just don't think Silver would be able to survive staying up for a 24-hour race without falling asleep at least once. Apple was proven to be a good leader during this event, and I think he'd be able to lead the team to victory regardless of who they were. And he's very familiar with the mountains, which is another point in his favor. I think Silver is also capable of this, and I think he'd do really well given what we see of how he works with Sebek and the White Rabbit Relay boys. But if Silver happens to fall asleep while sledding, that's not only going to be a time sink, but dangerous for him and the rest of the team. I feel like the mountain critters would take care of Silver if he got left behind, but if he was leading the pack and fell asleep, the rest of the crew might ram into him or get led straight off of a cliff, which is too big of a risk for me to feel comfortable with Silver being the captain, so Apple it is. The next question was training for the bead brawl with Neji or Jade. And this one is interesting because I feel like either of these guys would be good, but for different reasons. Neji actually knows what is going on, but Jade would actually pose a much more real threat in the ring during your training. Neji can teach you the theory and strategies, but he can't actually get in the ring with you. At least I don't think that he can. He may not be a frail old man, but I'd feel really bad if I happened to hurt him. Jade, on the other hand, would be a very formidable foe to fight and likely wouldn't break as easily. However, I, almost certainly, would be broken by the end of the day by him. I don't know which is more embarrassing, being injured during the actual competition or being injured beyond repair before the competition even begins. It's quite tricky, but I think the most reasonable thing for me to do would be to train with Neji, because at least then I'd have strategies at my disposal, so if I could read my enemy even a little bit, I might be able to strategize and survive. If I only practice with and against Jade, I may not have the skills or ability to recognize these other scenarios, so while I may be in better shape physically, I still feel like I'd be at a disadvantage, so Neji it is here. The next question was exploring Raintree Market with Deuce or Ruggy. This is Ruggy 110%. I will not be getting pickpocketed today, thank you very much. While our little exploration in the cloud calling is safe and dandy, I believe Leona remarks a couple of times that there's a decent amount of crime and that we would likely not survive the city if we weren't guarded, or something along those lines. I'm pretty sure he mentions it at some point. But Ruggy is no stranger to this environment and the pitfalls within, so he could look out for me and my purse while I pamper him with food and whatever else he wants. The street has to go both ways, right? And I think if my coin was at his disposal, he'd be much more invested in keeping it safe. That, and I think he'd know exactly where to go to get the best deals and would be willing to ensure I didn't get hoodwinked by some of the vendors. I think Deuce is also decent muscle, but he's also a little bit too trusting and a bit too dense to pick up on some folks' intentions that aren't outrightly hostile. I can't help but feel like we'd end up scammed slightly if we went together, even though he is quite good at picking out these things now that I think about it, because I'm pretty sure he had a lot of experience when he went with his mom to sales and things to kind of know and have a radar. but I feel like the Rain Tree Market might just be a little bit more chaotic than he's used to, and we would still end up in trouble. So I'll be sticking with Ruggy, no matter how much my wallet may suffer. The next question was collecting tropical fruit with Gino or Vil. So I'm picking Gino here, but only because of his comically large hammer. It's going to be way easier gathering and opening coconuts with Gino, so we can stay hydrated while we collect all the rest of the fruit. I also feel like he's not going to be as concerned about the sun and not having sunscreen on this isolated island, so we can get our work done much more quickly with less shade breaks and less complaining. I feel like I'm unfairly judging Vil in this video, with the theme park of this, because he's extremely dedicated to his survival in this scenario, I would have to imagine. But I also think that Vil would do his best to take care of himself along the way, and that could become a little bit of a hindrance, similar to the theme park scenario. Gino probably also has some street skills that could come in handy here, and he's, again, got that hammer that could smash Gontu's robots to bits if we were threatened, as well as open up the coconuts to give us a little hydration. In fact, I'm pretty sure that Gino could smash anything that threatened us with that hammer, although I guess Vil's magic would also work, but I like the visual of Gino bonking the sharks on the nose. Too much for me not to pick him here, so Gino it shall be. The next question was going surfing with Ace or Azul. So Ace or Azul? Ace or Azul? Somehow the wheel picked extremely thematic folks for both of these slots here, but I think when it comes down to it, I'm going to be surfing with Azul. Fun fact about me, I love the ocean and all the critters in it. Another fun fact about me, I've nearly drowned almost as many times as I have fingers, and most of those times were in the ocean. Should this stop me from going in the water? Probably. Does it? No. But with my track record and my non-existent surfing skills, I think Azul is probably the best choice for me to make here. The ocean is Azul's homeland, and if there is anyone who could save me from drowning without putting themselves too much at risk, it would be Azul. Or really any of the mermen. But only Azul is here for this scenario, so the task is left to him. Would he hold this over my head for eternity because it would be a life debt? Absolutely. But you know what this also means? He's certainly going to save me if such a fate were to befall me, because he's going to have a life debt. So I can learn to surf without the stress, and I'd be secure in my continued existence. Now there is also still a risk that I surf into the craggy rocks and completely shatter my body, which Azul can't do much about. But that's just a risk I'm going to have to take. The next question was dancing under the firelit sky with Lilia or Cater. This is also a tough question with one canonical answer, but I really don't know who I'd rather dance with. I feel like both of them would be fun, but I do have to pick just one, don't I? Alrighty, well, let's go with Lilia since I picked Cater for the first question. Lilia likely also knows a whole bunch of dances that he could also teach me if he wanted to. We could spend a fun night under the firelit sky, sharing dance moves and learning from one another. It'd be a little chaotic, a little silly, but also stress-free because there would be absolutely no judgment. If my two left feet decided to come to town, it wouldn't be a problem because Lilia would likely have a way to save me from my own self. And if somehow he can't dance, then we both get to be fools together. It'll be a grand old time with a grand old man. And we'll have some fun stories to tell when we get back to school. Next up was working Sam's New Year sale with Rook or Subback. This was another fun one where both of the wheel's choices reflected actual canon events, and I think given the choice, I'd much rather work with Rook. I can't help but feel that there would be a lot less pressure working with him overall, and it would also give me front row seats to his antics. Who knows what wonderful products he might even recommend for me? Plus, getting to see him work his charm close up would be an experience in and of itself. I also think that the game of Rook's New Year sale is way easier than Sebek's was, so I wouldn't immediately fail our team, giving us a shot to win that sweet, sweet bonus. Sebek is also just a little loud and a little too competitive in a way that I don't think I'd be comfortable with, and considering my middling athletic skills, I wouldn't be able to keep up with our challengers. It might even become a situation similar to his dorm uniform vignette where he decides that he has to do it all by himself because I'm such a pitiful little human. And just because he's right doesn't mean he isn't still a stinker, so my vote's gonna go with Rook here. The next question was teaming up with Apple or Jade for Beans Day. Now, here I'm picking Jade, and I fully understand that I will be used as bait or cut off as soon as I stop being useful. I am okay with this. I get it. However, I don't think I'd do much better with Apple either. Again, I have middling athletic skills, so I'm not going to be doing well in this event to begin with, so I'm going to be dragging down my teammates either way. Apple would likely try to save me from myself if we had a good relationship, or at least compensate for my shortcomings, and I would feel guilty about getting him out of the game early just because of my own inadequacies. Jade, on the other hand, would not hesitate to drop me and continue on with his plans, so at best he protects me, at worst I'm no better than I would have been anyway, and I got to chill with one of my favorite eels, so that's a plus. The next question was going shopping in Crystal Galleria with Jack or Ortho. And this is a very interesting conundrum because on one hand, Jack can carry all of the bags, no sweat, assuming I had more than a thal mark to my name, but Ortho could analyze the fashion pieces to ensure I'm not getting ripped off like that one brand was trying to do in Jamil's vignette. If I'm going to be spending money, I might as well ensure what I'm buying is quality, and since I wouldn't likely be buying much, I'm going to go with Ortho here. I also think hanging out with him is going to be more interesting generically, since Ortho would be able to tell me all sorts of stuff about the area, given his Googling ways, and I'd be able to witness Ortho's learning and discovery of the area firsthand by his side. I think we could both learn a great deal about fashion and food together, and he could take some awesome Magicam photos for me from really cool angles because he can kind of, fly. I think Jack would also be fun, but I don't know how into fashion he is or how deeply he cares about macarons and cafe food and stuff of that nature. He might be willing to learn, but I just can't really justify a reason for us to be there as much as I can for Ortho, so he's my choice. The next question is, take care of the Sooms with Ruggy or Silver? Another canonical conundrum, but I do think this one's a bit easier. I'm going to go with Silver because from what we know of Ruggy and his Soom, those two are going to be so busy they're not going to need help caring for one another. Silver and his Soom, on the other hand, are very sleepy boys, so most of the time they'll be sleeping, which makes taking care of them a bit easier. However, the times when they're not sleeping, I'd actually get to hang out with them, unlike Ruggy, so that would just be fun. And perhaps catching a photo or two of them sleeping together might make for a really cute memento. If they consent, of course. Silver is also just a nice, calm guy who wouldn't try to get anything out of me or force me into any of his silly little side jobs during the Soom sitting, so I'd have a better time in that regard as well. It'd just be a nice chill day with two chivalrous guys, and I can't think of anything better than that. So Silver it is here. The next question was whether you would want to explore Floor City waterways with Jamil or Kaleem. This one is no contest. As much as Jamil scares me, there is no way I am taking Kaleem into a complex maze of tunnels for exploration. Not only would Jamil kill me for putting Kaleem in that danger, but we would 110% get lost and die in the twist equivalent of the catacombs. At least with Jamil, I figure we have a fighting chance of getting out of there alive, or not going deep enough into it to begin with, so I could feel more comfortable with our exploration. I don't think Jamil would leave me down there, at least I sure hope he doesn't. And I think he'd be more willing to learn the history of the place and its significance than Kaleem would. All in all, I just think Jamil's the better choice here, even if we aren't buddies, because at least we won't die. And that's all I'm hoping for. The next question was climbing the Noblebell College Bell Tower with Floyd or Edia. And this one, it has to be Floyd. Again, it's really no contest because Edia is not even going to make it to the top. I have a feeling if I try to drag Edia up with me, he'll quit halfway through and then we won't even get to see the Bell of Solace. Because both of the times that Edia climbed the bell tower, it was because he was forced to. If given a choice, he's never gonna do it, so my only hope is Floyd. Now, Floyd could find it boring, or he could find it super fun, and I have a strange feeling that he'd absolutely try to ring the bells once he got to the top. He may not go for the Bell of Solace specifically, but he's absolutely gonna yank some cords and cause some chaos. So that'll be interesting, if nothing else. I don't really think I could stop him. I'm not really sure that I'd want to, but I think it'd be way more entertaining than desperately trying to push Edia up the stairs. Plus, who knows what little details might catch Floyd's eye on the way up, things I might not have noticed myself. It could be a learning experience in a variety of ways, and as long as Floyd doesn't try to throw me off of the top of the tower, I think we'll be fine. And our last question was guarding the campfire with Marja or Jamil during Vargas camp. For this one, I'm going to have to go with Marja because as little canonical sense as it makes for her to be there, I just think she'd have really interesting stories and would be a delight to chat with. She may be a grandma, but she stays up for the sledathon just fine, so I think she'd be able to handle a night of campfire guarding, and I would be able to ask her all sorts of questions about Apple, her, harvesting. I suppose I don't really need to know that much about Apple or the town, but I'd be insanely curious about Marja's life. What's her magic like? How did she meet her husband? What brings her the most joy? How was sledding? How long did she sled for? Just so many questions. I don't know if she would indulge the more personal ones, but her stories must be pretty cool and full of all sorts of adventures. Maybe she'd even have some wisdom to share with me that could help me grow. Or maybe she'd be reluctant to indulge me. Or perhaps she'd just brag about Apple the whole time. Who can say? But it'll be fun regardless. Jamil, I think, would be much more reluctant to talk, and if we're not chatting, I'm absolutely going to be falling asleep, which isn't going to help the fire stay burning, so Marja it is. And that was all my reasons for all of these event questions. As always, I'm quite curious if we're anything alike, or if my answers were totally different from yours, so let me know your thoughts down below. While you're there, I'd appreciate it if you could also let me know if you liked this video and want more content like it. If comments aren't your thing, you could always like and subscribe instead. And before you go, I'd just like to remind you that you're amazing and I hope you have a wonderful day.